everyone, it's Matt, and I want to first start off by saying thank you for watching my videos. It's been very appreciative, and I'm glad I can have been some assistance to you folks. I've received some feedback from my videos, but I want to just say thank you to everybody. Tonight, I'm going to be making some chocolate chip cookies. Now, chocolate chip cookies are really easy to make, and it doesn't take a lot of time. It does take a little effort, so they're not as easy as, say, these chocolate chip cookies, but I guarantee you'll get a lot more enjoyment out of making these cookies with your family as opposed to just slicing these puppies off and putting them on the tray and heating them up and then eating them. With this, you get to actually interact with your family members and other folks, and it's a good social activity. It really is. So it doesn't take a whole lot of skill. It doesn't take a whole lot of time, and you get some really good cookies out of it. Now, I have the slice and bake ones, but to be honest, we're going to actually use the Nestle Toll House recipe on the back of this package of chocolate chips because this recipe works, and this recipe has worked for a really long time, and it's sold lots and lots and lots of packages of these chocolate chips. And the main method used in making these cookies is called the creaming method. Now, previously we made some blueberry muffins, and that used the muffin method. And the difference between those two methods is that the principal fat, as in the butter, or in this case shortening, for the muffins was melted. In this case, the fat, which is butter and shortening, will be in its solid form, and looks like this. And we're going to mix it together with sugar, and that is known as the creaming method. And we're going to beat that until a certain specific time, and then we're going to start adding more ingredients. That is the specific difference between the creaming method and the muffin method. But anyways, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So what we're going to do first is we're going to cream our fat and our sugar. And we're using two types of sugar here and two types of fat. And from experience through the years and from my grandma, I've discovered that we prefer to use a combination of shortening and butter, which gives it not only a crispy texture, but also sort of a nice little moist texture to it. Whereas if you just use butter, one, it might spread more, and two, it'll be a little more crisp. So we use a combination of shortening and butter, and the recipe calls for 1 stick of butter. I'm making, of course, a double batch for the office, so I have 2 sticks of butter. I'm using butter flavored Crisco, which actually tastes pretty good. So this stuff is good. It comes in sticks. It looks like that, and below it is regular unsalted butter. Right? So go ahead and pour that into the bowl. There you go. And then we have 2 types of sugars. We have 3/4 cup of regular granulated sugar. Pour that in. And then we have 3/4 cup of nicely packed brown sugar. Now I'm using light brown sugar. Now the difference between light brown sugar and dark brown sugar is the amount of molasses they've put actually back into the sugar. Molasses is a byproduct of sugar production, and as many products which we are encounter these days, they take a lot of stuff out, but in the end they put the stuff back in. So this molasses came from the manufacturing of sugar, of refined sugar, and they gone ahead and put it back in, and we have light brown sugar. I typically use light brown sugar unless they specify dark brown sugar, which then I use that, which has, there you go, which has more molasses in it. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and get this going. Now typically if you look in your pastry books and professional baking books, you'll see that the creaming method can take up to 15 minutes doing the professional way. Now with cookies, you don't want to probably beat this for 15 minutes because if you're in a warm room, you're going to end up with a lot of sugar and a puddle of oil in the bottom of your mixer, and that's not going to be so good. But you do want to beat this enough to get nice, white, frothy. You want to see the butter change from a yellow color to a more pale color. And you want to see a little more fluffy, a little more volumetric. Yes, a little more voluminous. Voluminous, there's the word. Voluminous than it was when you started out with. So anyways, you go ahead and lift the bowl up into this locked position, and we're going to go ahead and start on slow speed. And then once it gets incorporated, we're going to go to the fast speed. Now, once you get it incorporated, you can really kick up the speed and go to high, because then you don't have any danger of flying out of the bowl while you're mixing it. But until it gets incorporated, you don't want to go on high, because then you just make a big mess. Alright, we've gone ahead and I've beat this for about 2 minutes. And what you have is this. You have the sugar and the fat mixed together in the bowl, and it's a little puffy now, and it's a little much more paler than it was before. And this is what you're looking for now. Before you continue, the number one rule in all baking is you always want to scrape down the sides of your bowl, make sure you get the bottom, and to do that you can use a spatula or a bowl scraper, but you know, spatula is fine. You can also use your fingers, but you know, spatula works fine. So I'm going to put this back in the bowl. So the next thing what you're going to do is we're going to add the eggs. And the eggs add moisteners and dryers in one convenient ingredient. They do both. So when we incorporate our eggs, of course, we want to raise the bowl back up into its locked position, upright and locked position. And then we want to start the mixture out in slow. And I've gone ahead and beat my eggs already. There you go. And I'm going to just slowly drizzle them in. Now, you don't want to pour them all the way in because you want the cream batter here to slowly absorb the eggs, and you don't want to create gigantic puddles and clumping and other things. So you just gradually add in your eggs in stages and wait for it to incorporate. And you can tell when it's all gone, the yellow streaks are gone. And when you're baking, you always want to try to use large eggs. That's the general standard. Extra large or jumbo is going to cause your recipe to come out differently. Most baking recipes are based off, especially if they're using the volumetric measurements rather than weight, they're based off of large whole eggs. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our dry ingredients. Just like with the muffin method, we did the wet ingredients and then we're going to do the dry ingredients. And this is how it works for a lot of the basic mixing methods in baking and so forth. So we're going to start out with our flour, and once again I'm using pastry flour because I have a lot of it, so it makes fine cookies. And it's a 2 1/4 cup of pastry flour. I'm using 4 1/2 cups here because I'm making a double recipe. And then to that you want to add some salt, and we're going to add 1 teaspoon or 2 teaspoons for me. There we go. Salt, once again I'm using table salt because we're doing the volumetric measuring rather than by weight, so I don't use kosher salt. And then we need our leavener, and today instead of baking powder we're using baking soda. Baking soda is different. We add 2 teaspoons or 1 teaspoon for a single batch. There you go. And we go ahead and we're going to stir this with our whisk. Once again, you can sift if you want, but today I'm just going to whisk. And as I'm whisking, I see an ingredient that I forgot to put in with my eggs. And that would be 1 teaspoon or 2 teaspoons for double of vanilla extract. All right. So go ahead. I'm going to add my vanilla and just pour it in there and mix it down low. All right. There we go. Now for a flour step, I'm going to go through this I'm going to pause, of course, pause the videotape. We don't have videotape. I'm going to pause the camera and go ahead and edit accordingly with the other batches, but I'm going to show you one addition. Once again, this is flour, and once flour hits liquid, you produce the protein called gluten, which causes things to become tough and structure based. That's why bread has lots of gluten in it, so it holds its nice structure, and it's nice and firm and sturdy and rugged, whereas cookies and cupcakes and brownies and stuff like that, we want less gluten development, so they're light and airy and fluffy. And we're going to try to beat this as little as possible, but we don't want to add the flour in all at once because then the batter will not be able to absorb it just the same way as the eggs would not have been able to be absorbed into the batter if we added them all at once. So we're going to add it in stages. And I'll just show you the first stage. You go ahead and add 1/3 of the flour, like that. And you raise your bowl and you start it out in slow. If you don't start it on slow, you end up cleaning your kitchen, and that's no fun. And in between each addition, you always want to drop your bowl down, take the spatula, and scrape it down. You always want to scrape down your bowl. And once that first installment is installed, you want to go ahead and start adding some more. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of the flour and get it incorporated, and I'll be back. Okay, I've gone ahead and incorporated the rest of the flour, and I've taken it off of the mixer. Here's our batter. It's looking pretty good. There you go. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. Today we're using Ghirardelli semi-sweet chocolate chips. And as with the blueberries, it's not necessarily a good idea to double your internal flavor yumminess stuff. Like, you know, doubling the amount of blueberries for a double batch, not a good idea, because then you don't get even dispersal, and your batter to blueberry ratio is really weird, and you get clumpy muffins that are soggy. Same with cookies. You want to make sure you have enough cookie batter to encompass or encapsulate your semi-sweet chocolate chips. So we're going to use, this is 12 ounces, and the recipe calls for 12 ounces. So we're going to add all 12 ounces into our bowl, and we're going to augment that with, I would say, a half of this other package. So not quite, you know, double, but there we go, 3/4. All right, and then you can do whatever you want with these. They last for a long time. And as with the blueberry muffins, when we have internal fillings like this, yummy, we're going to use the folding method to get that puppy in there, because we don't want to agitate our dough anymore, and we don't want to, well, we're not going to crush the chocolate chips so much, but we want to go ahead and incorporate these evenly. You can use the mixer, but the mixer, once again, would develop more gluten in the dough, and we don't want that, because we just want to incorporate our chocolate chips into the batter. Alright, I'm using a disher like I used for the blueberry muffins, and just go ahead and put those onto the sheet, about 4 lengthwise and 3 crosswise, and that should be good. You just want to make sure that your cookies are the same size as all uniformly, because then they'll bake uniformly, and you won't have some that are overdone and some that are underdone, and that makes for much better cookie consistency. And there we go, I get about 12 per tray. Some people do this and some people don't. A lot of people go around and mush the tops of the cookies down so they're a little flatter. For the longest time I didn't do this, and for snickerdoodles I don't do it at all, but you know, I go to school, I learn things, and I've learned to just, you know, tap down the tops of your cookies. And there you go. So go ahead and stick those into a 375-degree oven that you've preheated, and bake it for about 12 minutes until they're just about golden brown and delicious. You want to take them out just before they get to where they look done, because once you pull them out and let them sit, they once again continue cooking, because they don't have, you know, they don't come to a screeching halt as soon as they take them out of the oven. It continues, it's on its merry way, even though you've taken them out of the oven. So they'll bake for a little bit longer while they're sitting on top of the stove cooling. So there you go. Well, my cookies have come out of the oven, and as you can see, they're a lot flatter than most cookies, and this is due mainly to the substitution of pastry flour from all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour contains more protein, therefore more gluten would have been produced, which would produce more structure in the cookie, as opposed to the pastry flour that has less protein, and therefore you see less structure in my cookies. But I was debating whether I was going to put this video up on YouTube, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways to show folks what happens when you try to make cookies using pastry flour as opposed to all-purpose flour. They come out nice and dainty and fragile, and they still taste like a cookie, but they're just not the same as a regular cookie made out of a higher protein flour. Alright, to recap the recipe today, we made Toll House cookies using the creaming method, which means we started with 1 cup of unsalted butter. To that we added 3/4 cup of regular sugar, then 3/4 cup of brown sugar. We beat that together in the mixer until it was nice and fluffy. To that we added 2 large eggs and a teaspoon of vanilla and incorporated that. And our dry ingredients, which we combined together, was 2 1/4 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of regular salt. We mixed those together in a separate bowl and added it to our mixer on a low speed in stages, about 4 different stages, making sure to stop the mixer and scrape down the bowl between every additional stage. Once we got that all incorporated, we then took the bowl off the mixer and folded in 2 cups of chocolate chips. We then baked the cookies in a 375-degree oven for 14 minutes, changing rack position halfway through the baking process to make sure all the cookies bake evenly. Once again, thank you again for joining me today. This is Matt, and look forward to seeing you again.